Hello, my name is Marcus, aka Salem Queer, and this is my horror channel. Welcome to another video. This is a horror channel that does movie reviews of horror and thriller, also ranking different horror films and thriller movies, and soon to be other types of entertainment of books and merchandise and much more. Today's video, we will dive into my top 10 Shudder horror films. So Shudder is another streaming services like Hulu, Netflix, and you have to definitely subscribe to a membership with it. And it's actually decently priced. The subscription that I applied for was the $5.99 a month, which is way cheaper than Hulu and Netflix. But on Shudder, it just has all the horror and thriller movies that you want to see. It has all the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, 2010s, cheesy horror, dark horror, international horror. It just like helps you, it brings every type of horror fan in there, and at every level too. If you're a diehard, I love horror too, I'm like branching into the horror community, this would be a great start to do it. If you want to try it out for free, I don't have a code, but I'm going to help my homegirl out, Sarah Hawkins, aka Possessed by Horror. She has a code that I would definitely share for everyone to use. It's called Possessed30. That's her code. Use that and you can get a free 30-day trial of it. But if you don't use that, you can get a free 7-day trial, I believe. I think it's 7 or 2 weeks, but let's just say 7 since it's the shortest. That's what I did. I tried the shortest trial first just to see what it's like, and I like it. I love it. And they do a good shuffle or change of what horror they can add in and out. If you're a person that's looking for a TV show or a series, I would recommend A Discovery of Witches. That is a very good series to watch and somewhat horror, but it's not too much horror, and it's a fun witch show, which that's my weakness. How I include these films is based on my 3 ingredients, as I like to say: the filmography, the acting, and also the storytelling. I won't go too in depth with each one. I'll just give like a quick review or a quick response of why I like each film. And also I'll give like quick facts about each film of who directed it, who's in it, what's it labeled as a genre, and what year it came out. So before we get started, I just want to give a quick idea what this list looks like. This list includes, yes, horror films and some thrillers in there too, but also this list includes some comedy and documentaries, so get prepared for that. If you like to be notified or updated about my new videos or content at all, just hit the subscribe button and also set your notification settings to either getting an update every single time that I post or upload, or you can do it occasional too, which is nice because you don't have to get bombarded by so much. And my Instagram page for horror is Salem Queer, all one word. And let's dive into this video. So number 10 spot will be Jawbreaker.
A group of friends pull a prank that goes all wrong, and an investigator turns the school upside down, and things start to uncover with sinister reasoning.
Jawbreaker is a 1999 film. I would label Jawbreaker as definitely comedy and a teen, but within more of a thriller than a horror film. Jawbreaker was directed by Darren Stein, and Jawbreaker has a very nostalgic cast, I would say, in my very Mean Girls heart. And when I say Mean Girls is, I feel like Jawbreaker is very linked to Heathers, but it's past Heathers' time, but also it kind of maybe inspired Mean Girls in a way. But anyway, back to who is in Jawbreaker. The well-known one that sticks out to me is Rose McGowan. She is well known for her work in Charmed as Paige. And then we have Rebecca Gayheart. She's known for her horror involvement of Urban Legends, the movie. And then we have Judy Greer. She has become actually more of my favorite as time has gone on, but she's well known, and for me well known, in Halloween 2018, and she's going to be in the new Halloween Kills movie, and she's also in 13 Going on 30. And I did like quick notes when I watched Heathers, and like the phrase that popped in, or what I wrote down in my notes, is I said it's a very stylish Heathers movie, but not as engaging as Heathers. Overall, this movie was a fun ride if you're very into some like sassy, quirky teen elements into it, and how Rose McGowan just carries out her character of being like the bitch. She does a very good job executing that, and I don't know, it's very it's just a fun ride. It's just very nostalgic in the sense of, if you like the type of movies that are more of like, again, I keep comparing this to Heathers or Mean Girls, but has a little bit of like a crime thriller mixture into it. My number 9 spot will be Heathers.
Veronica is part of the most popular clique at her high school, but she disapproves of the other girls' cruel behavior. When Veronica and her new boyfriend confront clique leader Heather Chandler and accidentally poison her, they make it appear as a suicide. Soon, Veronica realizes that her boyfriend intentionally killing students he does not like. She races to stop her boyfriend while also clashing with the clique's new leader, Heather Duke.
Heathers is a 1989 film. I would describe or label Heathers as a dark comedy with some crime and thriller. Not really horror at all, I would say, but there's people that have like a cult following with this movie particularly would say there's some horror elements into it, but I'm not seeing it for myself, and I've watched this a handful of times. So if you're a person that believes that there's horror elements into it, please comment down below and tell me where you see the horror elements within Heather, and maybe I can revisit it and go back and analyze that. Heathers was directed by Michael Lehman. He is well known for his work in American Horror Story 1984, which I can kind of see some Heathers style into that season of American Horror Story. And again, this film has like a pretty good cast. It's very nostalgic, and as probably someone who grew up with this cast and seen them grow into even today of their work, it's pretty neat to see where they kind of start off. But the first one that I would recognize is Winona Ryder, and she's well known for her projects of The Strangers and also Edward Scissorhands. And then we also have Christian Slater. He is well known in some of his work too. The one that stands out to me the most for horror wise is Hollow Man 2. Oh, and also he was in Interview with the Vampire as the journalist. I forgot about that. And then, of course, we have Shannon Doherty. She is well known as playing Prue in Charmed. How I would describe this movie again, too, just like how I did with the Jawbreakers movie. Quick like notes that I said about it. It's like it has like a delicious bite to it, even though that it's a little bit outdated. And the reason why I say that is as a person that grew up in the 90s and early 2000s, and this is set, yes, in the late 80s, but how it's aged and continue on to inspire or involve its horror community or non-horror community, it just seems a little bit outdated, and I think it's just due to what we see, the style of the hair, the clothes. But I think now, as we're going into the late 2010s and now the 2020s, we're seeing more callbacks of that style, and I think now Heathers is kind of having a second wind or a revive, which I'm very happy about that, because it allows people like me to be able to just have that built up interest to go back and say, well, yes, the style's outdated, but it's actually like a fun, again, ride to watch this movie and see the quirks, the sass, and again, this is like a fun movie, maybe just to watch with a group of friends as well too, kind of like you would with Mean Girls. My number 8 spot will be Revenge.
Jen is enjoying a romantic getaway with her wealthy boyfriend until two of his sleazy friends arrive unannounced. Tension in the house rises and the situation becomes viciously intensifying. Shocking acts that leave Jen brutally left for dead. Unfortunately, her silence, she arrives, soon begins to relentlessly quest a bloody revenge.
This is a 2017 film, and I would label or put this in the genre of horror and thriller for sure, but also action. This is directed by Coralie Farget. Before I go into the actors and my overall idea, I wanted to give this quick resource that I found out about it earlier this week. I learned about this resource through Sarah Hawkins, aka Possessed by Horror. She's another horror channel that I follow, and I enjoy watching her videos of rankings and reviews, and she really is the one person that inspired me to do this on this type of platform. But she shared a resource that's called does the dog die.com. Again, that is doesthedogdie.com. And it's a platform for you to search every movie, and it'll tell you what kind of elements or what the movie has in there that could be triggering for people who are sensitive to certain types of movie moments. So for example, if you're someone who is sensitive of when a dog dies, it will tell you which movie has a scene that a dog dies. Or for another example, someone like me who is very sensitive of fingernails and fingers being chopped off or any sorts of that way, it will also tell you on there too which movies and how many scenes has that. So this is a great resource to just be kind of help you prepare if you're going to watch a film or a movie, and so you won't be shocked or surprised, or maybe make the decision that I can't handle a movie like that and I can't watch it. And again, the reason why I bring this up now, because Revenge, the movie of itself, can be very triggering from what I gathered from watching it myself. It has elements of, yes, gore. It's very gory. It's not gory like torture porn like Hostel or Saw. It's more different perspective of that. It's just more I'll just hold off until later on. But it does have a rape scene in it, and that's where for me I'm like, ooh, that can definitely trigger someone and cause them to just be able to pay attention to the film and itself. So I just share this so you can help you prepare to watch this if you want to watch it. If not, totally understand. No mad over here. But anyway, I was looking at the cast, and it's not very decorated with a cast that is very, very well known, but one name particularly stood out to me was Matilda Anna Ingrid Lutz. And the work that I recognized her from when I first watched this film was her involvement in the Rings franchise. She was in the third installment of it, which is called Rings. And how would I describe this movie and why it made its list on this rankings list? I would say it's a fusion of gore with feminism and exploitation. It takes a different lens of body horror. Again, as I was mentioning earlier, it doesn't go into body torture. It's just more of you're sitting there and you're like rooting for this girl to like get her revenge, and it's the way how the director like focused on just that piece of getting the revenge instead of focusing on her torturing these men that caused her life to be a living hell. in this moment of life. That's just where I kind of like the freshness of that, because a lot of the horror films in the past, with even Revenge, kind of get lost focus with the body torture or the body gore. For example, for me, The Last House on the Left, a good horror film, don't get me wrong, but for its overallness, I feel like it could have a better score if it didn't focus too much on the body torture. Number 7 on my list is Host.
Six friends accidentally invite the attention of a demonic presence during an online seance and begin noticing strange occurrences in their homes.
This is a 2020 film, and I would label this one definitely horror. It has the horror in it, but and supernatural. And I was kind of like sitting with it after watching it for the third time. And there's like a little bit of a mystery to it. So I would definitely put it within the horror, mystery, and supernatural. It was directed by Rob Savage. And I didn't really know or wasn't really familiar with any of the cast, except for there's one. Her name is Jima Moore, and I recognized her from the movie Wonder Woman. What I appreciated so much about this film was its fresh take on the virtual format horror that we've been seeing a lot in the past. I would say probably starting in 2016 or 15. We've seen the whole Zoom, MacBook, video call chat horror. And I like how we're starting to incorporate that into a current event or current living. And with this one, for also being done during the pandemic time, I'm actually impressed, very impressed with it. It's a very short film for, in general. Yeah, it's less than an hour long, which I think it's actually kind of good in a way if you wanted to watch this with a group of friends as well. And I know sometimes like you can get distracted, but this film actually kind of like entices you and keeps you in. And I like how they involve the what do I want to say? Oh, the side or the special effects, or the effects that we kind of use, the filters. That's the word, filters. How they use the filters on the laptops to incorporate the horror elements to it. Done very well. Probably the only thing that I would say that lacked in it was more towards the end of it, when it was going into the final reveal of the spirit. I was kind of like, well, that's a little bit weak sauce. Maybe they could spend a little bit more time developing the effects of that character, but understand with it again being the pandemic and they're just working with what they were able to work with. Again, very good. I would definitely give it a watch. It's a Shudder exclusive, so you definitely have to buy a membership through Shudder just to watch it. My number 6 spot would be Lizzie.
In 1892, Lizzie Borden lives in a quiet life under the strict rules established by her father. Lindsay finds a kindred spirit in live-in maid, Bridget, and friendship soon blossoms into a secret romance. But tension mounts when the Borden household, leading to a violent breaking point.
Lizzie is a 2018 film, and I would definitely label or put this in the genre of a thriller, maybe horror, maybe. Most of the time, it doesn't have the horror. It's kind of a slow burn. I will warn people. It's a little bit of a slow burn, but the last bit, the Act 3 part of the film, really does take a turn, and you're just like, whoa. And I could honestly see this film leading to another one. Like, I could see it. It would be a good storytelling in that way. But also, I would label it too as a mystery, crime, thriller, and a romance too, because since it involves the relationship between the two, well, is she a protagonist? I don't know. The two female leads, I would say. It was directed by Craig William McNeil, And his one work that really stands out to me the most was the new Twilight Zone that came out in 2019. And this had a cast where I really thought they delivered the character development and portraying the characters very well. The first actor that stands out to me was Chloe Segnavia. I forgot her last name, sorry. Or I don't know how to pronounce it. That's just my problem. But she's from a movie that really stands out to me as Boys Don't Cry. And another actor that's in this is Kristen Stewart. And of course, we know Kristen Stewart from a lot of films, but the two that pop up in my head is Panic Room and the Twilight franchise. So the overall premises of this film is pretty much a psychological thriller that is set into the 1892 murders of the Borden family. And how this was done was actually artsy. It's very artistic, yes. I'm a sucker for artsy horror. I know that's not everyone's cup of tea. For example, Neon Demon. It's a slow burn. People don't know what's going on, and mostly the time when you go into a horror film, you're thinking, I'm expected to see more adrenaline, suspense, and not all horror is like that. Like, you don't need to have that quickness of the adrenaline. It can just build up from the cinematography of it. So that's what I like about this. It's just how it's a time period piece, but it's very artsy, and it just gets me into the adrenaline or mood slower, but more into it. But I'll just warn you ahead of time that this is just what I like. My number 5 spot will be Haunt.
On Halloween, a group of friends encounter an extreme haunted house that promises to feed on their darkest fears. The night turns deadly as they come to an horrifying realization that some nightmares are real.
This is a 2019 film, and I would label this movie in the genre of horror, thriller, and slasher. This was directed by Scott Beck and Brian Woods, and they are the writers of A Quiet Place and A Quiet Place Part 2 coming out in 2021. And the only actor that I recognized or just know from previous work was Katie Stevens. She's the main protagonist female in this movie. And her previous work was Polaroid. That's another horror film. And I think you can watch Polaroid on Netflix. If not on Netflix, I would just, if you have a Fire Stick, just say Polaroid, and it's on one of the streaming services. What I really liked about this film is how it just surprised me. I saw the trailer of it, and it looked cheap to me. It looked corny to the point of it's too cheap, and I'm not gonna first give it a try. And wow. Took me a little bit just to watch it, or grow the courage to watch it. I was waiting for this film actually to be released on streaming services. I think it was released in theaters. I think so. It was, maybe I could be wrong, but I remember waiting for the streaming services, and when it popped up on Shudder, I really just thought, okay, why not? So overall with this film, what I thought of it, I liked how it provided the creepy and unpleasant various pieces that a slasher movie could provide, but done it in a very fresh way. And I like how they incorporated the haunted mansion into it, because I think that's the biggest fresh piece of it, and how it can incorporate different types of slasher characters or antagonists. But overall, I'm glad I gave it a shot, and I think this is a movie that is kind of unappreciated in what I'm seeing from like other critics or other movie reviewers. And this is like a good movie to help you get into the Halloween spirits, or if you want to just be brave enough and go into a haunted house after watching this, which I'm one of those people that's crazy enough that watches a movie like this and then say, okay, I want to go to a haunted house. My number 4 spot is going to be a documentary film called The Kane Hodder Story to Hell and Back.
The emotional story of Kane Hodder, who survived a near-death childhood accident to become one of film's biggest and most beloved horror icons.
This documentary came out in 2017, and the documentary overall is just talking about the story of Kane Hodder, who is what most of us die-hard horror fans would say is the best Jason Voorhees from the Friday the 13th franchise. He was the he was Jason in the Friday the 13th movies of Friday 7, which is New Blood, 8, which is Manhattan, Jason Goes to Hell, Jason X, and also in the Hatchet franchise, which is another good slasher franchise movie to check out. Overall, the documentary is very telling. It's very heartfelt, surprisingly, for being a horror documentary. And it shows just how not only Kane's backstory of going or overcoming hardships, but also kind of shows the horror Hollywood corruptionness in a way of how they just disrespected him, in my opinion, or how I would describe it. Especially how dedicated and appreciative he is of his fans. Like, really, really one of those horror icons that just shows that, and you can see it. And I really like to watch documentaries like this just because, we grew up with these iconic characters, and the people that can portray those characters and give that energy and give that presence is just really a warm, fuzzy blanket around. And this is just good if you need to watch really an overcoming story. My number 3 spot is going to be Summer of '84.
Teenager Davy Armstrong is a conspiracy theorist who begins to suspect that a police officer is a serial killer. With help from his 3 friends, Davy launches a daring investigation that soon turns dangerous.
This is a 2018 film, and I think you can watch this on Shudder still. Going through it just yesterday, and it's still on there, so should be on there still. I would definitely label this movie into the genre of horror and thriller and slasher. This was directed by Francis Simard and Anouk Wizzle. You're seeing that, a hot mess. And the only actor that stood out to me as familiar was Graham Vercher. He was well known for me in the TV series Supergirl and The Good Doctor. That's right. Overall, the premise of this movie, I would say it's very easy for someone to add in nostalgic feels into a 80s coming of age horror type of movie format, but it can also be done not so well. And how this movie did it, killed it. Not only it followed the tropes and had you go into the storyline of feeling that nostalgic and not over nostalgic, it's just enough, but it challenges the trope and it does a complete 180 and leads you to being like, oh, like that was not expected, especially being a horror like 1984 themed type of movie. And this one just like, again, it floors you, especially the act 3 part. Like, oh, that's the best part, and that really won me over with that movie. My number 2 spot will be Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street.
Actor Mark Patton shares his story of being a closeted gay man while starring in the movie A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, a film that he began to suspect had homoerotic subtext.
This is another documentary film, and this is a documentary by Mark Patton. If you don't know who Mark Patton is, he is the lead protagonist in the Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. So this documentary just dives into the mixture of first going into how Hollywood perceived and practiced homophobia tendencies of Mark, especially during the 80s when in this documentary you will see how the Hollywood, I keep saying Hollywood, the people in Hollywood just really outed him because he wasn't out at that time, but then you see the corruption and how they even disrespected him in that way and still continue on disrespecting him in current times now by just not even recognizing or validating like what they did to him was just horseshit. But now how the movie first turned into a joke, and that kind of hurts because I really thought this was a good pivotal moment for LGBTQ horror was this film, and that's what this documentary talks about, how it was a turning point for the community and how this film even now today is not a joke anymore. It's more of a pop culture icon with all of its like callbacks and other fun pieces of it. I don't want to ruin it, especially if you're someone who has not seen Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. I would say watch that if you haven't first, and then come back and watch this documentary and just see how Mark Patton and his life of being in the Hollywood eye during this film. My number one spot is going to be Hornor, A History of Black Horror.
A century of exploitation and sidelined, and finally being embraced, this is the untold story of Black Americans in Hollywood through their connection to the horror genre.
This is another documentary film. It came out in 2019. And how I would describe this movie first off is I feel it's a very powerful history lesson for us to go through. It's very essential for us to go through this history lesson because of seeing and identifying how Black people played in horror films and how that has evolved over time from even back to the early 1900s to even during the late 2010s and now 2020. But the overallness of this film is why I was very moved by it and why it landed number one for me is just because it called back on all the very famous horror films that changed my life, but how this documentary just really opened my eyes to what I was very ignorant to in the elements of it, of being racist and how it just, yeah, I'm like shook, as you can tell. Like there's just so much to say and I don't want to spend too much, but overall it just carries that controversial conversations that we need to still have with our family, friends, co-workers, everyone, to talk about like how even Black people are still being perceived in cinema and how that has affected even with white people, myself, not being able to see or understand like how that representation on a film can be hurtful to our Black community, and how we just need to build more of a holistic listening of being empathetic and compassion more for people. But now tell me what you think about my picks for Shudder. Do you like the picks, or what do you not like about my top 10 list? What would be on your top 10 list of Shudder horror? This will be my last rankings list for the streaming services series, I would call it. I will start diving into more movie reviews, and then I'll do other different types of rankings lists, but not so often of rankings lists. If you want to wait and check out the next thing that I'm going to be doing, I can't wait to see you on the next video. Thank you. Bye.